started, we can.
Okay,
I
so
can do the
you're going to
housekeeping
do
remarks.
the Zoom preamble then?
I'll do the preamble.
Yes.
All right. Good morning and welcome, committee members, liaisons, and members of the public to the Legal Services Trust Fund Commission Homelessness Prevention Funds Committee meeting. Thank you for joining us. We are getting started now. We are using Zoom with the goal to foster a more inclusive environment and effective meeting. If you would like to comment during the meeting, please use the raised hand feature. To use the raised hand feature by phone, dial *9 on your phone's dial pad to raise your hand and the same to lower it. Please use this tool to virtually indicate that you would like to speak to help the chair facilitate the discussion. All Legal Services Trust Fund Commission and committee meetings will be recorded and posted to the State Bar's website. A friendly reminder that this is a video conference and to please be aware of your surroundings behind you. Zoom captioning is available. To enable this, select Live Transcript at the bottom of your Zoom screen and select Enable Auto Transcription. A few tips for working with Zoom. For those using Zoom on a computer, when you are on mute, you can hold down the space bar to temporarily unmute yourself. If you're using your phone to dial into this meeting, please be sure your computer's microphone is on mute to avoid any feedback issues. And while joining audio via computer is highly recommended, if an individual loses audio, they can call in separately using the Zoom conference number. All right.
Okay, great. Can we have a roll?
Let's do roll. So beginning with the committee members, Chair Meeker.
Yep.
Aflagi. Absent. Iskin.
Here.
Mahoney is absent, and Schreiber.
Here.
So we do have a quorum, and I'll do roll for liaisons, presenters, and then State Bar staff. Selena Copeland from LAC.
Lauren Klein here from LAC.
Hi, Lauren. Thank you for joining us.
Hi.
Laura Brown from the Judicial Council.
Here.
Hi, Laura. Melanie Snyder from the
Here.
Judicial Council. Hi, Melanie. And Kim Taida from the Judicial Council. Not here. And then I'll go through State Bar staff. Rocio Apolos.
Here.
Hey, Rocio. Chris McConkey is here. Jennifer Zelnick. Hi, Jennifer. Michael Chong.
Here.
Hi, Michael. Kim Wormsley is here. Brady Dewar. Not here. And did I miss anybody? Okay, I don't think I did. Okay, so that's roll call. And Jim, our first agenda item is approval of the minutes from March 1st, 2023.
Okay, so any comments? No comments? Do we have a motion to approve?
So moved. So moved.
Great. I think maybe Christian was the first to say it, so I'm gonna, but I can, Eric, you can be the second if you like.
That's great.
Okay. So Schreiber moves, Iskin seconds. Aflagi. Absent. Iskin.
Yes.
Mahoney. Absent. Schreiber.
Yes.
Great. I saw a thumbs up. Perfect. Okay. And then Meeker.
Yes.
Motion passes. Great. Thank you, everybody. And then if my memory serves me on the, go ahead. Oh, yeah,
Do
go
we
ahead.
have any public comment?
Thank you. Thank you, Jim, for reminding me.
Nobody's indicating they want to speak.
Okay.
Thank you, Kim. Thank you, Jim and Kim. And if memory serves me, the next agenda item is HP grants updates, and I'll hand it over to Jennifer.
Thank you, Chris. Share my screen. Okay. Can everyone see my screen? Excellent. Okay, so this is agenda item 4.1, approve 2023 to 2024 homelessness prevention supplemental or HP4 supplemental competitive grants. We'll cover some background, the review process, scores, funding recommendations, time for a discussion, and then we'll move to the resolution. For our timeline, as a reminder, on January 23rd, 2023, the committee approved the RFP and scoring rubric. On February 10th, staff released the application. On March 10, applications were due. Between March 14 and April 11, the commissioner staff team scored applications. Today is May 12th. We are meeting for the committee to approve awards. And on July 1st, 2023, the grant period will officially begin. So a little background on the Budget Act and HP4. The Budget Act of 2022 allocates $30 million in state funds for homelessness prevention legal services. This includes administrative costs up to 5% or $1.5 million. Statutory preference for applicants that serve rural or underserved communities and partner with or subgrant to community-based organizations or local jurisdictions. And partnerships or subgrants must be in effect as of June 30th, 2022. On December 13, 2022, the Commission approved 46 HP4 grants totaling $25,229,306. This, of course, was less than the total available funding. So the Commission delegated authority to the HP Funds Committee to develop a supplemental funding application and to score and approve awards for the remaining $270,694. Excuse me. Permissible uses for HP4 and HP4 supplemental are the same as HP3. Eviction defense, other tenant defense assistance in landlord-tenant rental disputes, or services to prevent foreclosure for homeowners, including pre-eviction and eviction legal services, counseling, advice, and consultation, mediation, training, renter education, and representation. Additionally, legal services to improve habitability, increasing affordable housing, ensuring receipt of eligible income or benefits to improve housing stability, legal help for persons displaced because of domestic violence, and finally, there's a catch-all category of homelessness prevention. Selection criteria and other parameters were approved on January 23rd, 2023. The HP4 supplemental grants are limited to qualified legal services projects and support centers that have received any homelessness prevention formula and or competitive grant. This means an HP 1, 2, 3, or 4. The budget cap is $325,000 and there's no minimum budget. And grants would be for either 12 or 15 months long, that is from July 1st, 2023 to June 30th, 2024, or from April 1st, 2023 to June 30th, 2024. Essentially, applicants could elect to claim back expenditures for the quarter prior to the grant start. And finally, applicants could propose expanding or extending existing HP grants or new projects entirely. The rubric was also approved on January 23rd. It's a tool to guide evaluation. As always, scores do not guarantee funding, and the committee may exercise discretion to make awards that best accomplish the goals of the Budget Act. The committee will try to distribute grants statewide and strive for a diversity of HP interventions in the spirit of the Budget Act. And this required a post-rubric comparative analysis. Again, this is the rubric. It is essentially the same as the rubric for HP4, with the one addition being that under project impacts and strategies, the scoring team considered past and current performance on other HP grants. So the review process, we received 30 applications, 16 this number doesn't add up, but there were 4 support centers, and that should say 26 QLSPs. The total requested amount was $7,210,107, which is over 2.2 times the total available funding. The average ask was $240,336.90, and the median was $277,698. Given the short timeline to review, the Legal Services Trust Fund Commission delegated authority to staff to score in consultation with the committee. The committee provided consultation during scoring by having the committee chair participate in all scoring sessions, and after scoring by discussing and adjusting the scoring team's results. This is today. Scores. There was a 3-person scoring team, and we arrived at consensus scores for every proposal. Our team was composed of 1 commissioner and 2 staff. The highest score was a 91, the lowest was 51. The average score was 71.63, and the scoring team recommends funding 17 out of 30 proposals. That's 3 support centers and 14 QLSPs. These are the scores, and the column on the left, beginning with Legal Aid of Sonoma County and down to Immigrant Legal Resource Center, are the scores of the proposals that are being recommended for funding, whereas the column on the right shows the other proposals that will not be recommended for funding. I'll give everyone a moment to look at that slide. Okay. So for funding recommendations, the scoring team considered, among other factors, the proportionality of the project deliverables to the funding request, the need to cut close to $500,000 from the combined asks of the 17 applications recommended for funding, the degree of fiscal conservatism in the budget, considering the narrative explanations, organizations' capacities to implement an impactful project with less than the full amount requested, and the sufficiency of the budget narrative and other explanations. On average, organizations would receive 87% of their request. And staff asked each impacted applicant whether they would have to adjust deliverables if they received the recommended amount. Applicants either will not have to modify their deliverables or will do so proportionately to the decrease in their budget. These are the funding recommendations, and I'll leave this slide up for a moment for everyone to take a look. Okay. The 17 recommended projects articulate a clear nexus to homelessness prevention. 16, or over 94% of the proposals recommended, serve rural communities, and all of the proposals serve underserved communities. All of the proposals include partnerships and/or subgrants. These proposals would serve every county, but focus on 18 in particular, which are articulated in attachment E. And it would balance QLSP and support center services by funding 14 QLSPs and 3 support centers. All of the 17 recommended projects scored exceeds expectations in at least one category, and many of them scored exceeds expectations in several. A sampling of the services these proposals will provide include eviction and criminal records clearing to improve housing stability, counsel to tenants facing eviction, legal services to improve housing stability for veterans in rural and frontier counties, litigation to improve habitability, advocacy for public benefits to financially stabilize individuals at risk for homelessness, and other homelessness prevention legal services. As a reminder, in addition to the memo, the attachments include the HP4 supplemental RFP, the scores and funding recommendations, a breakdown of scores, the profile sheets for every application, and a map of the recommended projects, excluding the 2 that would be statewide. So now we can have a bit of discussion. If anyone has questions. Okay, Jim, should I move to the resolution?
Sure.
Okay, so should the committee concur with staff's proposal, passage of the following resolution is recommended. Resolved that the Legal Services Trust Fund Commission Homelessness Prevention Funds Committee, acting on behalf of the Legal Services Trust Fund Commission under its delegated authority, approves the 2023 to 2024 Homelessness Prevention Supplemental Competitive Grant recipients and amounts as described herein.
Do we have a motion?
So moved. I'll second.
So I think that was Schreiber moving and Iskin seconding. Aflagi is absent. Mahoney, I'm sorry, Iskin
Yes.
went out of order. Mahoney, absent. Schreiber
Yes.
and Meeker.
Yes. And
Motion
I'd just
passes.
like to thank you, Jennifer. Great presentation. I just want to let the rest of the committee knows that there was substantial agreement amongst the coders on all these issues. If there had been major disagreements, we would have brought it back to the committee to discuss as a whole.
Some new faces in there as well. Like,
New-
meaning some of the organizations are a little bit, the ordering was newish, I guess. Appreciate everybody's work on that.
Yes, thank you so much to Jim in particular for all of your work on that. All right, should we move to item 4.2?
Yes.
Great. Oh, I'm sorry. So again, these are just the recommended amounts, but you've already viewed those. So I will move on to the next agenda item. Okay, next we have item 4.2, which is to recommend 2021 to 2023 homelessness prevention or HP2 formula grant reallocations. We'll go over some background, the reallocation process, reallocation recommendations, and the resolution. For background, we'll discuss the California Government Code section 12531 and HP2. California Government Code section 12531 allocated $31 million for homelessness prevention or HP legal aid. The types of funding are outlined in this table. Formula accounted for 75% after administrative costs, competitive 25% after administrative costs, and administrative costs for the State Bar and Judicial Council were 5%. In total, 71 formula grants were made and 12 competitive, or 83 altogether. The grant period is January 1st, 2021 to December 31st, 2023, or 36 months. And grantees have now reported on their spending through December 31st, 2022, which equals 2/3 of the grant. So some background. In fall of 2022, staff learned that Asian Americans Advancing Justice Asian Law Caucus, or AJALC, had not yet spent funds from or begun work on its HP2 formula grant. On December 13, 2022, the Legal Services Trust Fund Commission required AJALC to return the first 2 installments of its HP2 formula grant. The commission designated authority to the Homelessness Prevention Funds Committee to approve a spend down plan for AJALC's 3rd year of funding. However, on January 23rd, 2023, the committee found that AJALC declined to submit a spend down plan for year 3 and directed staff to withhold AJALC's 3rd HP2 formula payment. The committee also directed staff to redistribute AJALC's entire HP2 formula award. Because the committee directed staff to redistribute AJALC's HP2 formula award, staff felt that it was prudent to contact all HP2 formula grantees to invite them to think about whether they were concerned about spending down their grants, and if so, to consider voluntarily reallocating some funds. On April 3rd, 2023, grantees submitted their second annual HP2 report, which allowed staff to confirm that some grantees reported underspending. As a result, staff emailed 14 grantees who reported spending 60% or less of their HP2 formula funds and invited them to voluntarily reallocate some of this funding if they had spend down concerns. Greater Bakersfield Legal Assistance volunteered to return $30,000 of $449,757. Legal Aid Society of San Diego volunteered to return $50,000 of $739,260. With AJALC's entire award, there is $331,271 in HP2 formula funds for redistribution. Staff notified eligible HP2 formula grantees about the reallocation possibility and reran the formula for just those 67 eligible grantees. The number 67 comes from the total universe of 71 formula grantees, of course, minus AJALC, GBLA, LASSD, and AIDS Legal Referral Panel. Whereas the former three were not eligible because they are reallocating some or all of their HP2 formula funds, AIDS Legal Referral Panel was ineligible because they had a 2-year HP2 formula grant that concluded on December 31st, 2022. In total, 32 grantees opted in to receive additional HP2 formula funds. Staff then reran the formula for just those 32 grantees, and all of those grantees confirmed that they opted in to accept the higher formula reallocation amounts. So today, the committee will recommend the reallocation amounts. And then on May 26, participating grantees will submit budget revisions and funds will be due from GBLA and LASSD. Staff proposed to review budget revisions and present recommendations to the Legal Services Trust Fund Commission due to time constraints and the need to get funds out to grantees as soon as possible. The commission will approve the reallocation amounts and budgets on June 23rd. Grantees will submit their signed amendment to the grant agreements on July 7th. And then on July 19, we will disperse the HP2 formula reallocated funds. Just as a note, the asterisk here indicates that although funds will be dispersed in late July, staff recommends that grantees be allowed to use the funds retroactively to January 1st, 2023. This gives grantees a bit more flexibility to use the funds for the final calendar year of the grant, rather than limiting it to roughly half a year. And this will ensure that grantees who opted in to the reallocation can effectively spend these additional dollars for legal services homelessness prevention. So this chart shows some of the reallocation recommendations. The next slide shows the remainder. As you can see, the largest reallocation will go to Disability Rights California with $88,012. And the smallest allocation actually goes to a few different grantees and will be for $1,769. And again, this is the second half of the reallocation recommendations. Here are the resolutions. Should the committee concur with staff's proposal, passage of the following resolution is recommended. Resolved that the Legal Services Trust Fund Commission Homelessness Prevention Funds Committee recommends the 2021 to 2023 homelessness prevention formula grant reallocation amounts as described herein and listed in attachment A, And it is further resolved that the committee recommends allowing grantees to use these reallocated HP2 formula funds retroactively to January 1st, 2023. And it is further resolved that the committee recommends that state bar staff have authority to recommend HP2 formula budget revisions that grantees submit to reflect these reallocated funds.
Great. Does anybody have a problem with voting these as a whole?
Turn left on Sunset.
So hearing no objections, can we have a motion?
I'm giving it up to you, Eric.
Okay, so moved. Thanks, Chris.
Thank you, Eric. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Sorry, I
Thank you.
tried to do that. I thought I did.
I will ask if the chair would like to second, or if
I'll second,
Christian would
yeah.
like to second. Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Jim. And thank you, Christian, for being interested in seconding. Okay, I'll take the roll of call vote. So Aflagi, absent. Iskin,
Yes.
Mahoney, absent. Schreiber,
Yes.
and Meeker.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Jim, can I ask, does that conclude the voting items today?
I think so. Is that not right, Chris?
That's correct.
Yeah, I don't mean to be rude. I'm heading off to graduation, so I'll sign off now.
Oh,
Okay.
Thanks,
Happy
Eric.
graduation.
enjoy. Yeah,
Thanks.
enjoy.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you so much
Thanks
for
for all,
joining us.
and thanks for all your work, everybody. Appreciate it.
In 1.2 miles.
Sounds like
It's
he's on his
almost
way.
there. Yeah. Great. All
Hope
right.
he
Well,
has his
thank
cap
you.
and gown.
So is this where I take over, Jennifer?
Yes, if you don't mind, Chris.
Great. Thank you. And thank you for continuing to advance the slides for me.
Yeah.
Great. So the last agenda item is a non-voting one. It's staff's report to the committee on the 2021 through 2023 homelessness prevention, i.e. HP2 grant spending and services with the information that we have from years 1 and 2 of this 3-year grant. And this is a very similar looking report to the one that we provided at the end of January on HP3, right? We reported on the first year of that 3-year grant. So it's kind of structured in the same way. It is a mid-grant update to the committee, so you can get a sense of like how spending is looking, how services are looking. You can ask staff questions and sort of get a sense of how we're monitoring the grants. Okay, next slide. So you kind of saw the slide already. It's just a reminder for you that HP2 is authorized by the California Government Code. The total amount of funding is $31 million. Similar to HP3, the legislature specified that 75% after administrative costs would go to formula awards. The other 25% after administrative costs would go to competitive awards. The administrative costs were 5%. So you have here again the amounts that went to formula versus competitive awards and the number of awards. So there's 83 grants. I can't quite remember the number of nonprofits that received HP2 funding because some of them received both a formula and a competitive grant, but I believe it's more than 70. Maybe 71. Number could be wrong, but that's what I have in my memory. The grant period for HP2, as Jennifer reported earlier, is exactly 3 years. It goes from January 1, 2021 through December 31, 2023 for all but 2 of the grants. And this is before the commission effectively authorized the committee to reallocate AJLC's grants. So before then, One Justice received a 2-year competitive grant and AIDS Legal Referral Panel received a 2-year formula grant. Otherwise, they are 3-year grants, and AJLCs has subsequently been reallocated. So far, grantees have reported on their spending and their services for calendar years 2021 and 2022. It's 2 of the 3 years, but for One Justice's competitive grant, it's their whole grant. And for AIDS Legal Referral Panel, it was its entire formula grant. Okay, next slide. And as a reminder, unlike for HP3, which has quarterly reporting, which is a lot of work for the grantees, but terrific for the commission and staff to kind of have some frequency of information flow to sort of monitor spending and services. HP2 is annual reporting. So after each calendar year, the grantees report on their spending and their services to the state bar in the spring. So for 2021, I think they filed their first year report in April of 2022. And then for calendar year 2022, they filed their second year report this last April of 2023. So we didn't have that kind of nice quarterly information flow for HP2 like we had for HP3. Okay. So HP2, to start with the sort of state of spend down, HP2 grantees receive 1/3, and this is consistent with other multi-year grants. They receive like an equal installment of their grant every year. So for most of them, that's 1/3 of their grant. For One Justice's competitive grant and for its Legal Referral Panel's formula grant, they received, which were 2-year grants, they received half their award each year. Otherwise, they all received 1/3 of their award. And in 2021 and 2022, the HP2 grantees together received $19,731,344. Together, they all spent 94%, or $17,858,876 of these installments for years 1 and 2 by the end of 2022. So 100% would be all of the money that had been distributed for 2021 and 2022. It wouldn't be looking at 2023's payments because they could not have spent that yet. So 94% of the money that had been distributed had been spent. There is a nuance here. The actual number of dollars that grantees reported spending in years 1 and 2 is a little bit higher than that. It's actually $18,097,189 spending. What staff did for its HP3 report to you in January, and what we decided to do again here on this HP2 report, is to actually back out that $238,000 that HP2 grantees reported in overspending. They are allowed in their reports to say, hey, we actually spent more money than you gave us. We're dipping in, so to speak, to our 3rd year payments, even though you haven't actually sent us those dollars yet. They're allowed to do that and kind of like front the money, so to speak. The reason we sort of back that out in this report is that $238,313 would otherwise mask the extent of some programs is reported overspending, spending in advance of getting their 3rd year payment would sort of mask the extent of underspending by that amount. So of the amount that's actually been sent out, 94% of it has been spent. So this leaves 6%, about $1.8 million unspent. And there's actually a typo on this bullet point. I apologize. The number's actually more favorable. Grantees spent at least 75%. The numbers got switched for 76 of the 83 awards. So there's only 7 of the HP2 grants that are under 75% spending for years 1 and 2. And I've already made this note about ALRP and One Justice. So we'll go to the next slide. So I'll just pause for a sec. And you can see on this, now you can see there's only about 7 dots that are under the 75% mark, which I realize 75% isn't actually demarcated here. But you can see that there's about 7 dots to the left of where 75%'s line would be, and the other are above it. Again, this is just looking at the state of spend down for payments 1 and 2. For all the grantees. So for most of them, that's 2/3 of their payments. For One Justice's grants, that was its entire award. And for ALRP, that was its entire formula grant.
Chris,
yeah.
Question. Yeah, was there commonalities for the reason of underspending, like problems with hiring?
Yeah, and I'm going to ask Jennifer, Dwayne, just in case you have a little bit more recent information, but before I took a trip right before this committee meeting, the analysis I had heard was that it was slow hiring during the pandemic in 2021, that it kind of like the sector-wide recruitment issues that like we see in all of the grants, that is finally, I don't know if this is a fair characterization, if Mikey or Rocio or Jennifer agree, that is finally slowly starting to recover. But in 2021 and 2022, it was still impacting spend down for this grant. Jennifer, would you add? Did you see anything else?
Yeah, I think that's accurate. I would add that there were reported project launch delays that have had a continuing effect on year 2 as well.
As the committee knows, AJLC had its entire grant reallocated. They had not spent any of it before that happened, and we included them here just because they were an original grantee and just for the sake of sort of like transparency, and so that the number of awards add up to the correct number that the commission had originally made. They're included on this graph, but we do call it out, otherwise it would look really weird that there was one grant at 0%. So I'm just going to pause. I'm going to offer my commentary and just say that oh, thank you for going back. Just say, Rocio, Michael, Jennifer, feel free to offer your own take on it. I actually think this is a very healthy spin down as an entire group. If you look at the group of HP2 grant, not any one individually, but at the HP2 grantees as a whole, I think I think the percentage was 94% spend down at the end of year 2 is really good. If the sort of like slow but gradual improvement in the spend down rate between years 1 and 2 continues into year 3, I can offer my personal optimism that there will be more or less spin down of HP2, especially with the committee's reallocation today of some funding by GBLA, and it was LASSD, Jennifer, this one, and then AJALC's award. Okay, and I welcome my like colleagues to provide like a less optimistic opinion, but that's my reading of the numbers.
And correct my recollection, Chris, which one, was it HP2 or HP3 that were COVID funds?
The HP3 grants were federal coronavirus state fiscal recovery funds, and HP2 was I might get this slightly wrong, National Mortgage Special Deposit Fund. So the most pandemic responsive funds was HP3.
I was just wondering about the possible impacts if the Republican proposals of clawing back unspent COVID-19 funds would impact these grantees.
Oh, well, I think that to my knowledge, as long as the HP3 grantee, HP2 is state dollars, like HP1 was, so it would sort of, it would be up to the state legislature to decide whether or not and how to like reclaim funds, but we don't expect that to happen. And then as long as the HP3 grantees can spend down by December 31st of 2024, they should be fine. It is our office's expectation that any HP3 dollars that are left unspent as of the end of 2024 will be sent back. Okay, next slide. So State Bar staff, this is similar to what we did for HP3. So State Bar staff contacted HP2 grantees that had spent 60, so this, I'm going to pivot here just a little bit. We took a slightly different tack. 60% or less of their entire grant. So whereas up until now, I've been looking at the percent of spend down for all of the money that we've actually sent to date, right? Year 1 and 2 payments, like we didn't expect them to have spent year 3 because we hadn't sent them year 3's funds yet. We actually adopted a slightly different analysis for deciding whom to contact. So for deciding whom to reach out to ask them about how their spending is going on HP2, we actually looked at their entire award amount. So we contacted organizations that had spent 60% or less of their entire grant. They had spent all of their HP2 payments for years 1 and 2. If they had a 3-year grant, they would be at 66%. So that's not a huge difference, right? 66% of year 1 and of their entire grant would be total spend down for the first 2 years. So 60% is actually just 6% difference, right? So we were a little bit like extra cautious in our outreach, but because spend down was looking so healthy, that didn't require us to actually reach out to too many. So we ended up reaching out to about 14 formula grants and 5 competitive grants to just check in, say, at the end of year 2, you know, if you were fully spent down, that'd be 66% of your grant. We see you're at 60%. How's it going? Unsurprisingly, most of them, especially if they were kind of close to 60%, were like, it's fine. You know, it was a little slow in year 1. We're catching up. Jennifer, is that fair? Okay. Staff evaluated their explanations for reasonableness, as in, did they have a reason for not having spent down all of year 1 and 2's payments that was acceptable, as opposed to simply like, we forgot about this grant or something like that. Determined that their explanations made sense, that they were reasonable, that they were there was no need for extensive like fact finding or technical assistance beyond letting them know that we were available to them if they needed to make adjustments to their budgets, if they needed to make a revision to their budget in order to ensure spend down by the end of this year. So for example, if there was a delay in recruitment, or they're experiencing retention issues due to the sector's work to try and offer more competitive pay, they do have the opportunity to try and move some funds right out of salaries and into contract services to clients, which would be like outsourcing some of the work to independent contractors or into other non-personnel rows of their budget to an extent, right? To ensure spend down, they can do that, and we let them know that we're available to help them with that. And then here we have again the most common reasons for underspending was staff vacancies. So that could be recruitment delays or retention challenges. And as Jennifer mentioned, some grantees reported project launch delays. Okay. So the Office of Access and Inclusion staff also gauged progress towards first year deliverables. So we also look at services like we did for HP3, for all 83 grants. This analysis is inherently less quantitative. Unlike looking at spending, where you can literally just look at the amount of money they have spent by the end of 2022 and compare that to the size of their award and generate a reliable percent of spend down, comparing the number, the amount of work, like the number of cases they hope to have closed, or trainings they hope to have provided, or outreach events they hope to have attended in their application, to what they're reporting in their year 1 and 2 services reports, lends itself to a somewhat quantitative analysis for some grantees, but a very challenging one for other grantees. Some grantees were leaned into more qualitative descriptions in their application and or their reports. And so staff had to, like HP3's analysis, we had to exercise some discretion and sort of gauging the health and progress towards services by the end of year 2. So we didn't actually put in the appendix for today's memo or on the slide what we thought the percent of progress was, because it was so subjective. But we did actually for ourselves in our notes roughly gauge if we thought that grantees were at least 75% of the way towards where they said they wanted to be by the end of year 2. The application, as a reminder, actually asked them to describe the work they would do in years 1, years 2, and years 3. So we can look at the application and take year 1, add it to year 2, and get a sense of what they hope to have accomplished by this point in time. So we did actually generate a percentage for ourselves, but because it's kind of guesswork, we didn't put it in the memo, lest it appear as though it was a purely quantitative and reliable analysis. Okay. So we do look at things that tend to be more quantitative, like cases closed, self-help clinics, number of self-help clinic participants, etc. And we put those totals on the slide here. These are in the memo as well. So you can sort of see all the work that's happened in years 1 and 2. Staff, and I should say that these particular metrics, these particular outputs don't always capture the work that support centers perform, or even all qualified legal services projects, because they can also do things like public policy advocacy. They can help pass really, ambitious homelessness prevention legislation at the federal, state, and local levels. They can do, they can create informational materials and circulate those. They can convene partners, government and otherwise, and those things aren't necessarily captured by things like cases closed in clinics. Okay, so we were sure to note that in the materials for today as well. But we do look at these. This kind of captures the bulk of work that qualified legal services projects and some support centers are doing with their HP2 dollars. Next slide, please. So staff contacted organizations for at least 33 of the 83 grants that it thought might be under target, so under 75% of the way towards their goals for years 1 and 2, regardless of where their spin down is at. Like this is a bifurcated analysis to see how things were going. Those grantees have clarified, and you can see their numbers on the appendix. Those grantees have clarified or explained their progress, and staff is at this time engaging in technical assistance with some of those grantees around whether or not they think they're going to hit their application targets, and how to sort of maximize the impact of those grants. I will say that when grantees apply for an award, they don't always know exactly what the demand is going to be for particular interventions. They don't always know at the before they start doing the work if they're going to, end up prioritizing cases closed versus trainings versus clinics or other interventions. They make their best guess, and then they try to, at least it's our hope that they will pivot as appropriate over the course of a multi-year grant in response to actual client need and other sort of, I'll just say, environmental factors like the economy and the pandemic, and recruitment and retention challenges. So we have been hearing back that a lot of them have been making those sorts of pivots. Let me know if this is a fair characterization. Again, Jennifer, on the whole, largely their explanations have been reasonable, have made sense, and have been responsive to sort of like the challenges they're facing in recruitment and retention, and they're trying to be as responsive as possible to client needs, possibly with a couple exceptions where staff is doing a little fact finding to find out. And I think, Jennifer, you might be prepared to say, like, make a note about this, but with maybe one or more grantees about sort of like, is their work on track in a way that's reasonable. But we can say that as an entire group, and this is sort of the conclusion of the memo, the state of spend down and the volume of work is looking very good and healthy in sort of OA&I's opinion for HP2. And that by the end of this year, by the end of this 3-year grant, we're expecting more or less full spend down and a high volume of work if the trajectory from years 1 and 2 kind of continues in the way it has been. Okay, next slide. And that might be my last slide. Okay, yeah, so I'll hand it back to Jennifer.
Thanks, Chris. So I'm just going to provide a very brief verbal update about the Coalition of California Welfare Rights Organizations, or CCWRO. During the HP2 services review, we identified some questions about reporting with CCWRO for their HP2 and HP3 formula grants. Their HP2 services report raised questions for staff about how they're tracking HP2 and 3 activities, and if they're separated. So at this stage, we're still in the fact-finding portion, and this will play out more during their monitoring visit next week. That's very coincidental, as well as the HP3 desk review that will be concluding soon. Independent of the monitoring visit, we are going to continue to work with CCWRO to learn more. Because the committee happened to be meeting, we felt that it would be prudent to notify you all now, but we are certainly not at any stage to make recommendations or kind of conclude the fact finding. And we do plan to provide the committee with more details at its July meeting. When we'll have concluded providing TA to CCWRO if there is anything that needs to be reported. So that's that
Jennifer,
update. Yes.
Quick question.
Sure.
Did the data reporting issues crop up because of grant monitoring or because of getting ready for the monitoring site visit?
This issue cropped up in the course of the HP2 services review.
Okay, good.
Yeah, and I would emphasize what Jennifer just said is, or I'm in full agreement with what she said, which is, had the committee not had a meeting today, we would have, it's our practice to gather as much information as we can, fully analyze it, and then if there's a there, bring it to the committee. We're actually not there yet. But because the committee is meeting today and we happen to be, it was already on the agenda to report to you on like the state of HP2 services and spend down, this felt very relevant. So we were like, well, let's flag that we are looking into one program specifically. Thank you for reminding Jennifer, specifically around sort of like how they track spending between grants, HP2 and HP3 in particular. But we're unsure at this point in time if there's a there. We did something similar in the fall when we reported to you that we were looking into whether or not there might be supplantation with one of the grantees. Subsequently, we found there wasn't, right? So it's just a kind of, you know, if there is something to report to you on with CCWRO, it would be at your next meeting.
Well, if you could, Chris, if you could give me an update as soon as you guys know from the monitoring visit, even if it's before the next meeting, I'd like to know.
Great. Jennifer, I'm going to make a note of that, but maybe you'll help me remember that too.
Definitely.
Thank you, Jim. And Jennifer mentioned the desk audits a moment ago, and just as a reminder on what those are, for HP3, which uses federal dollars, we have an extra layer of monitoring on top of reviewing quarterly reports for HP3, so it's even more often, and on top of our triennial site visits, more often if there are findings from the significant findings from a previous visit, but at least once every 3 years. We also have desk audits for federal grants. So those would be the HP3 grants and the Cal HFA grants, California Housing Finance Agency grants. And those are, they're kind of like mini site visits. They're like deep dives into sort of their infrastructure for tracking spending and grants compliance with an eye towards federal requirements. So I'm unsure if my understanding is we're doing desk audits for all of the HP3 grantees. Like I just am not 100% sure, but I'm 90+% sure. But I know we're doing them for those that kind of scored like medium or high risk on our risk assessment tool. So anyway, CCWRO has a desk audit like most, or if not all of the HP3 grantees. It has its normal site visit that was already scheduled from long ago, and it happened to be going through HP2 services review. So it has like lots of different directions that we were sort of like working with them. Does that conclude the HP2 services and spending report, Jennifer?
It does. So I can stop sharing my screen.
Yeah, so I don't know if the committee is interested in my commentary, but I will say, you know, we reported on the state of HP3 spending and services at the end of year one of that 3-year grant back in January. And that was kind of more of a mixed picture. It was more underspending. It was less than halfway through the grant period. You might remember that staff recommended to the committee, and this is still our recommendation, we take a look at the state of HP3 spend down at the halfway mark, which is this summer. So they will have filed 6 of their 12 quarterly spending reports by the end of this July. And that we look at the halfway point to see where spending is at. And then we, if appropriate, still appropriate, we do a reallocation process for HP3 over the summer or fall, where we ask the HP3 grantees to project their spending through the end of the grant. And if they're projecting underspending, to kind of gather those funds and reallocate to the programs that can spend them to maximize the chances of spend down on HP3. That was our January recommendation. That's still our recommendation. I just wanted to compare that to the HP2 sort of picture that we presented today, which I think at the end of year 2, so they're well over halfway through the grant, is looking very good. For if you look at the group as a whole. Are there any questions? Great. Well, I think this is the first HP Funds committee meeting in like a year and a half that we might actually end early. But they would just, like Eric was saying, I guess it was two easy votes and a quick report. But is there anything from the rest of the OA and I team that's here? Or did the Judicial Council or LAC have anything? All right.
Slam dunk meeting. Well, I want to thank Chris and Jennifer for your great work. And Chris, can you stay on for just a minute? I'd like to
Yes.
talk to you about yesterday's meeting.
Oh, great. Yeah, actually, the just because when we close this meeting, this is the like the official webinar that's being recorded. When we end it, I might lose you. Let me send you, Jim, a Zoom invitation, and we can open another Zoom room.
Okay.
Thanks, Jennifer. Thank you, Chris.
Have a good weekend, everybody.
Right. Thank you,
Thanks.
everyone.
Bye.
Happy
Yeah.
Friday.